I don't remember the moment I fell in love with her. Not because it wasn't important, but because nothing about it felt like a moment. It felt more like a slow acceptance. Like realizing you've been standing in warm water for a while without noticing when you stepped in. There wasn't a grand gesture. No sweeping confession. No sudden certainty. There was just a growing sense of comfort. And then, without realizing it, a growing sense of attachment. We met through a mutual friend. One of those small, casual gatherings that doesn't feel worth mentioning until years later, when you realize your entire life quietly pivoted around it. A few people in a living room. Cheap drinks. Someone's playlist playing too loud, then too quiet, then too loud again. I wasn't in a good place. I wasn't in a bad place either. I was somewhere in between. Working a job I didn't hate, but didn't care about. Living in an apartment that felt temporary even though I'd been there for years. Waking up, going to work, coming home, scrolling, sleeping. Not unhappy, not fulfilled, just existing. She was sitting on the floor when I noticed her. Back against the couch, legs folded under her, listening to someone talk about a problem that didn't really matter. She wasn't trying to be interesting. She wasn't trying to be noticed. She was just there. That stood out. Later, I sat next to her. Not intentionally, not strategically. It just happened. We talked about where we grew up. About how both of us had moved to the city thinking it would feel like something. About how it mostly just felt like noise. She laughed quietly. Not in a performative way. Not the kind of laugh meant to pull attention. Just small. Contained. Honest. When the night ended, she asked if I wanted her number. No build-up. No flirting. Just a simple question. I said yes. On the walk home, I didn't feel fireworks. I didn't feel overwhelmed. I felt calm. That was new for me. We didn't text constantly. Sometimes hours passed between messages. Sometimes a full day. It never felt like a game. No one was trying to appear less interested than they were. When we did see each other, conversation felt easy. Not exciting. Not intense. Easy. Coffee dates. Walks through neighborhoods neither of us knew well. Sitting on park benches watching dogs we didn't own. Talking about families. Old memories. Things we liked. Things we weren't sure about. She didn't overshare. She didn't ask deeply personal questions. She didn't push. She let things surface when they were ready. That made me trust her. I found myself telling her things I didn't usually tell people. Not dramatic things. Small insecurities. Passing thoughts. Moments from my day that felt insignificant. She listened. Not in a problem-solving way. Not in a therapist way. Just present. That mattered more than I realized at the time. Being with her felt quiet. Not boring. Quiet. Like being in a room where nothing bad was about to happen. I hadn't realized how rare that feeling was for me. After about a year, we moved in together. Not because we had planned some future. Not because we had talked about forever. It just made sense. We were already spending most nights together. Already splitting groceries. Already leaving clothes at each other's places. 2 rents felt unnecessary. So we found a small apartment. Nothing special. Thin walls. Old appliances. A bedroom barely big enough for the bed. But it was ours. The first months were good. Not perfect, but good. We learned each other's habits. She liked to wake up earlier than I did. I liked staying up later. She drank her coffee too fast and always burned her tongue. I forgot to close cabinets. She forgot where she left her phone even when it was in her hand. At night, we talked in bed. About work. About annoying coworkers. About things we wanted to do someday. Trips we might take. Cities we might live in. Nothing concrete. Just vague ideas. We fell asleep in the middle of sentences. There was an unspoken assumption that we were a team. Not in a dramatic way. Not in a us against the world way. More like, we occupy the same life. That felt enough. For a long time it was. I don't know when things started shifting. If I had to be honest, I probably wouldn't have noticed at all if it hadn't been so gradual. At first, I thought she was just tired. Work had gotten busier. Longer hours. More responsibility. She came home quieter. Less talkative. She still hugged me. Still said I love you. Still slept next to me. So I didn't question it. Sometimes she went straight to the shower when she got home. Before, she usually sat next to me first. Told me something small. Now she didn't. I told myself it didn't mean anything. People change. Routines shift. Long-term relationships aren't supposed to look like the beginning. That's what everyone says. So I believed it. When I asked how her day was, her answers got shorter. Fine. Busy. Tiring. I'd ask a follow-up. She'd shrug. Same stuff. She started spending more time on her phone. Not in a secretive way. Not hiding it. Just more. Scrolling. Texting. Smiling at things she didn't show me. I noticed. But I didn't say anything. Because noticing didn't feel like enough of a reason to speak. Because I didn't want to be the kind of person who overanalyzed. Because I didn't want to be difficult. So I stayed quiet. I told myself this was normal. This is what stability looks like. We still function well. Bills got paid. Groceries got bought. We watched shows together. We went to family events. From the outside, we probably looked fine. Inside, something felt thinner. Not broken. Not painful. Thinner. Like a connection that was being slowly stretched without anyone noticing. I started hearing about her life in summaries. Oh yeah, I went out with Jenna after work. Mark was telling me about his breakup. Small statements. But each one landed heavier than I expected. Because I used to be the person she told first. I didn't bring it up. I didn't know how. How do you say? I miss being the first person you think of. Without sounding needy? Without sounding like you're accusing someone of something they aren't consciously doing? So I kept it to myself. I started doing the same. If something happened at work, I asked myself if it was worth mentioning. If I felt stressed, I told myself she was already overwhelmed. If I felt hurt by something small, I minimized it. I stopped reaching. Not because I didn't care. Because I didn't want to feel like I was interrupting. We still said, I love you. But it started feeling automatic. Like muscle memory. Something we said because we always had. Not because we were actively choosing it in that moment. We still slept in the same bed. But we faced opposite directions more often. Not in anger. Not after fights. Just quietly. Separate. I didn't feel unloved. That's the strange part. I felt unnecessary. Like if I disappeared from her day, it wouldn't disrupt much. The thought scared me. But I pushed it away. The moment that changed everything wasn't dramatic. There was no argument. No confrontation. No tears. It happened on a Tuesday. Nothing special about it. I got off work early. Earlier than usual. I decided to cook. Not as a romantic gesture. Not as a surprise. Just because I had the energy. I texted her. Home early. Making dinner. She didn't respond. I assumed she was busy. I cooked anyway. Pasta. Something simple. I set the table. 2 plates. 2 forks. I lit a candle without really thinking about it. Then I laughed at myself and almost blew it out. I left it. She came home later than usual. Walked in. Dropped her bag. Hey, she said. Hey, I said. Dinner's almost ready. She nodded. Went to wash her hands. When she came back, she looked at the table. Oh, she said. You cooked? Yeah. Thought we could eat together. There was a pause. Not long. Not tense. I already ate, she said. I grabbed something with Jenna after work. Forgot to tell you. She said it casually. Like weather. Like a neutral fact. Not like an apology. Not like something that mattered. Oh, I said. She sat down anyway. Pulled out her phone. I served myself. We sat in silence. She scrolled. I ate. She didn't ask how my day was. She didn't ask why I was home early. She didn't notice the candle. She wasn't being cruel. She wasn't trying to hurt me. She just didn't think of me. And I realized, sitting there with a warm plate of food in front of me, that I hadn't even crossed her mind. Not when she made plans. Not when she decided to eat. Not when she was walking home. I wasn't part of the decision-making process of her life anymore. I wasn't someone she checked in with. I was someone she informed later. There's a difference. Something in me went very still. Not shattered. Not angry. Still. Like a door closing quietly. I didn't say anything. I didn't know what to say. If I said, you forgot about me, it would sound small. If I said, I feel invisible, it would sound dramatic. So I stayed quiet. But I knew. I knew I wasn't a priority. I knew I was an afterthought. After that, I started seeing everything more clearly. Not in a paranoid way. In a tired way. I noticed how often she shared news with other people before me. I noticed how she laughed more freely on her phone than she did with me. I noticed how she talked about her future in singular terms. I'm thinking about taking a trip. I might move departments. Not we. Not maybe we could. Just I. We still lived together. Still slept in the same bed. Still said I love you. But I felt like I was living with someone who had already emotionally stepped away. I thought about leaving. Not seriously. Not with a plan. Just as an idea. What would it feel like to be alone? The fact that the idea didn't terrify me scared me. We eventually had a conversation. Not a big one. Not a dramatic one. We were doing dishes. Water running. Plates clinking. I said, do you ever feel like we're more like roommates than a couple? She thought for a moment. I don't know, she said. Maybe. But isn't that kind of normal after a while? I nodded. Even though it didn't feel normal to me. I didn't push. I didn't explain. I didn't tell her about the dinner. I didn't tell her about feeling invisible. Because I already knew the truth. You can't talk someone into wanting you. So I stayed. For months. We coexisted well. We were polite. We were functional. We were quiet. I started pulling back emotionally. Not in retaliation. Not consciously. I just stopped offering parts of myself that weren't being received. I shared less. I expected less. I cared less. Not in a healthy way. In a numbing way. Eventually, she said she needed space. Not during a fight. Not tearfully. Just one evening. I've been thinking about staying with Jenna for a bit. My first feeling wasn't panic. It was relief. I hated that about myself. But it was true. Okay, I said. She looked surprised. Like she expected resistance. I didn't have any left. She packed a small bag. She hugged me. It felt familiar. And hollow. She left. The apartment felt quieter. But also lighter. Not happier. Just lighter. After a week, she texted. I think I need more time. I stared at the message. Then typed. Yeah, that makes sense. That was it. No official breakup. No final conversation. Just a mutual understanding that something had already ended. When she came back for the rest of her things, we were polite. We said, I'm sorry. We didn't say for what. Then she left again. I didn't cry. I didn't collapse. I sat on the couch and felt tired. I had been grieving the relationship while I was still in it. I just hadn't had the language for it. Now, when I think about her, I don't feel anger. I don't feel dramatic heartbreak. I feel a quiet sadness. And a quiet clarity. I wasn't abandoned. I wasn't betrayed. I was slowly deprioritized. And I stayed longer than I should have after I realized it. Not because I was hopeful. Not because I was brave. Because I didn't know who I was without the version of myself that existed inside that relationship. I don't have a big ending. I don't have a lesson. I don't have closure. I just have an understanding. Being loved isn't just about being cared about. It's about being considered. It's about being included. It's about being thought of. I realized I was an afterthought. And once you see that, you can't unsee it. That's the part that stays with me. Not the goodbye. Not the boxes. Not the empty apartment. The moment I realized I didn't matter in the ways that count anymore. And I stayed anyway. Quietly. For a long time. For a while after she left, nothing in my life looked different. That was the strangest part. The same alarm went off in the morning. The same coffee mug sat on the counter. The same route to work. The same emails. The same small talk. If someone had been watching from the outside, they wouldn't have seen a breakup. They would have seen a man continuing. Inside, I felt rearranged. Not shattered. Not destroyed. Rearranged. Like furniture quietly moved in a dark room. You don't trip over anything. But you know the layout isn't the same anymore. I kept expecting some delayed wave of emotion. A night where I'd suddenly collapse. Where I'd miss her so badly I couldn't breathe. Where I'd regret not fighting harder. Where I'd wish I had begged. None of that happened. What came instead was softer. Heavier in a different way. I started noticing how much energy I had spent trying to make myself smaller while we were together. How often I had pre-edited my thoughts. How frequently I had talked myself out of bringing things up. How many times I had convinced myself I was asking for too much when I was really just asking to be included. Those realizations didn't make me angry. They made me tired. A deep, bone-level tired. Not the kind sleep fixes. The kind that comes from carrying something for too long without realizing how heavy it is. Some nights I'd sit on the couch in silence. No TV. No music. Just the low hum of the refrigerator. I used to be afraid of that kind of quiet. It felt accusatory. Now it felt neutral. Sometimes lonely. Sometimes peaceful. Often both at the same time. I noticed how often my phone stayed untouched. Not because no one existed in my life, but because I didn't have a default person anymore. No one I automatically sent small thoughts to. No one I reflexively updated. That absence felt bigger than losing her specifically. It felt like losing the assumption that I had a place to land. I realized something uncomfortable. I had built my sense of being wanted almost entirely inside that relationship. Not in an unhealthy, obsessive way, but in a quiet, background way. Like, someone thinks about me. Someone considers me. Someone checks in. When that disappeared, I didn't just lose her. I lost evidence that I mattered. That took longer to process. I started replaying moments. Not obsessively. Not in a loop. Just occasionally. The dinner. The short replies. The way she said my name less often. The way she stopped asking questions. Not to punish myself. Not to create a villain. Just because my brain was trying to understand how something can die without ever screaming. The conclusion I kept coming back to was simple. She didn't wake up one day and decide she didn't love me. She just slowly stopped choosing me. And I slowly stopped asking to be chosen. Neither of us announced it. Neither of us acknowledged it. We just participated in it. That's harder to accept than a dramatic ending. With a fight, you can say, this happened. This caused that. With drifting, all you get is, it faded. And fading feels personal even when it isn't intentional. I didn't rush into dating. Not because I was noble. Not because I was healing. Because I didn't know how to show up as a full person anymore. I didn't know what version of myself I was supposed to bring. The one who learned to be quiet? The one who learned to expect nothing? The one who learned to make himself easy? None of those felt right. So I stayed alone. Not in a romantic, self-discovery way. In a very ordinary way. I went to work. I came home. I cooked for one. I washed one plate. I slept in the middle of the bed. I started noticing small instincts. When something funny happened, I reached for my phone. Then stopped. There was no obvious person to tell. That scared me more than missing her. Because it meant I had lost touch with the part of myself that expects to be heard. Not by her. By someone. I didn't want to become numb. I didn't want to become closed. I also didn't know how to reopen. So I started paying attention. Not in a self-help way. Not with journaling or affirmations. Just noticing. Noticing when I felt myself shrinking. Noticing when I held back a thought. Noticing when I assumed disinterest before it existed. Those habits didn't start with her. But they got reinforced with her. And I didn't want to carry them into whatever came next. If anything ever came next. Some nights I thought about reaching out to her. Not to get back together. Not to reopen anything. Just to say, I hope you're okay. I never did. Not because I was strong. Because I didn't think it would give either of us anything real. We already knew how our story ended. Quietly. I wondered sometimes if she ever realized I had become an afterthought. If she ever noticed the shift. If she ever lay awake feeling the same low-level loneliness and didn't know what to call it. Maybe she did. Maybe she didn't. I'll never know. And I've made a kind of peace with that. Not closure. Not resolution. Acceptance. I stopped framing the relationship as a failure. Not because I was romanticizing it, but because calling it a failure felt inaccurate. We didn't implode. We didn't destroy each other. We shared a chapter. It ended. That's all. What hurts isn't that it ended. What hurts is how long I stayed after realizing I wasn't truly part of her inner world anymore. Not because I owed myself suffering, but because I didn't believe I deserved more than what I was getting. That's the part I'm still unpacking. Why I equated calm with connection. Why I equated familiarity with intimacy. Why I accepted being optional as long as no one was actively hurting me. Those questions don't have neat answers. They just exist. Some days I feel fine. Some days I feel hollow. Some days I feel grateful we didn't drag it out longer. Some days I wish I had spoken sooner. None of those feelings cancel each other out. They coexist. I don't miss her the way people talk about missing someone. I don't ache for her presence. I don't fantasize about what could have been. I miss the version of myself that existed before I learned how easy it is to become invisible. I miss feeling chosen without having to ask. I miss assuming I mattered. That's different. If I ever love someone again, I don't think I'll be looking for intensity. I don't think I'll be looking for perfection. I'll be looking for small, quiet evidence. Do they tell me things as they happen? Do they reach for me instinctively? Do they include me without having to think about it? Do I feel myself expanding or shrinking around them? Because those questions feel more honest than any big romantic gesture ever could. I realized I was an afterthought. Not in one devastating moment. Not in a way that shattered me. In a slow accumulation of quiet proofs. And I stayed longer than I should have after I realized it. Not because I was weak. Not because I was noble. Because I didn't yet know how to leave something that hadn't officially broken. Now I do. And that knowledge isn't empowering. It isn't dramatic. It's just there. Like everything else in this story. Quiet. Heavy. Real. That's all I have. And for now, that's enough. I don't tell this story out loud. Not to friends. Not to coworkers. Not to anyone who asks how we ended. When people ask, I say, it just didn't work out. Which is true. It just isn't complete. The complete version takes too long. The complete version sounds like I'm overanalyzing something that didn't explode. Most people understand breakups that come with clear reasons. Cheating. Lying. Fighting. Incompatibility you can point to. They don't know what to do with a breakup that happened because two people slowly stopped choosing each other. So I don't try to explain. I keep it simple. Simple feels safer. But alone, late at night, I replay things in a quieter way. Not to torture myself. Not to rewrite the past. Just because memory doesn't disappear on command. It wanders. It drifts. Sometimes I remember the first night she slept over. Not in a cinematic way. No candles. No soundtrack. We brushed our teeth side by side. Argued about which side of the bed was better. She fell asleep before me. Her back facing me. I remember thinking how strange it felt to have another body in my space. Not invasive. Just present. Comfortably present. I didn't think about forever. I didn't think about love. I thought, this feels good. That was enough. I remember the way she used to tell me things as they were happening. Not packaged. Not summarized. Raw. I just had the weirdest interaction. My boss said something that made me feel stupid. I don't know why that bothered me, but it did. She didn't wait until she had figured out how she felt. She figured it out loud. With me. That mattered more than I realized at the time. Because being invited into someone's unfinished thoughts is intimacy. Not polished vulnerability. Not big confessions. Unfinished thoughts. Somewhere along the way, I stopped being the place those thoughts landed. Not all at once. Not intentionally. Just gradually. And I told myself it was fine. People grow. People get busy. People change. All true. Also incomplete. I think about the version of myself in the middle of the relationship. Not the beginning. Not the end. The middle. The version who noticed something was off but couldn't name it. The version who felt lonely while sitting next to someone. The version who kept waiting for things to go back to how they were without realizing that how they were was already gone. I feel a lot of tenderness toward that version of me. Not pity. Not shame. Understanding. He didn't know what was happening. He just knew something hurt in a way he couldn't explain. And instead of honoring that pain, he minimized it. He told himself it wasn't important enough. He told himself other people had real problems. He told himself this is what long-term relationships look like. Sometimes they do. Sometimes they don't. The difference is subtle. And I didn't know how to tell the difference yet. I don't hate her. I never did. Even at the end. Even after. If anything, I feel a quiet gratitude. Not for the ending. Not for the hurt. For the clarity that came afterward. Because I know myself a little better now. I know I disappear quietly. I know I adapt. I know I can tolerate emotional scarcity longer than I should. That knowledge isn't comfortable. But it's useful. Some nights I still imagine an alternate version of us. Not a fantasy where everything works. Just a version where we notice sooner. Where one of us said, hey, I feel like we're losing each other. Where the other didn't shrug. Where we tried. Not harder. Just honestly. I don't know if it would have saved anything. Maybe we were already incompatible in ways we couldn't see. Maybe the drift was inevitable. I don't torture myself with that question anymore. Because there's no answer that changes the present. The present is simple. She's not here. I am. And I'm learning how to live with that. I don't feel dramatic heartbreak. I don't cry in the shower. I don't stare at old photos. What I feel is quieter. Like a low-grade ache. Not sharp. Not constant. Just there. Somewhere behind my ribs. A reminder that something meaningful existed and no longer does. Sometimes I catch myself almost telling someone new something personal. Not because I'm ready to date. Not because I'm trying to move on. Just because the instinct to share is slowly waking back up. When that happens, I notice it. I don't judge it. I don't rush it. I let it exist. That feels important. I don't know what kind of partner I'll be next time. If there is a next time. I don't know if I'll be better. I don't know if I'll be braver. But I know I won't ignore the feeling of becoming optional again. I know I won't confuse peace with connection. I know I won't stay in a place where I feel like I have to earn basic presence. That doesn't make me strong. It just means I learned something. Slowly. Painfully. Quietly. I realized I was an afterthought. Not because she was cruel. Not because she meant to hurt me. But because love, when it isn't actively tended, doesn't always die. Sometimes it just shifts. It becomes something smaller. Something quieter. Something that looks fine from the outside. Something that feels empty on the inside. And I stayed in that emptiness longer than I should have. Not because I loved suffering. Because I didn't know how to ask for more without feeling like I was asking for too much. Now I know the difference. And that knowledge doesn't feel like a victory. It feels like weight. But it's a weight I can carry. So this is where I am. Not healed. Not broken. Not searching. Not hiding. Just here. Learning how to take up space again. Learning how to let my thoughts exist without apologizing for them. Learning how to trust that wanting to matter is not a flaw. It's human. That's the truth I keep with me. Quietly. Like everything else in this story.